Today we're looking at Unit 4, Notes number 3, American Life Changes. So we're seeing how during the 1920s people are becoming more modern and some of their values begin to change and how they think about things and the roles that people have also change. In 1920s America, social doors were opening and barriers were breaking down. Women, youth, and minorities were gaining roles in society. Social norms were breaking down and everyone was enjoying the post-war good times, which led to the 19th Amendment. So the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. And so this is an amendment to the Constitution. So it changes how every state does it. So now women can vote in every state. And ultimately, the 19th Amendment was passed in 1920. The right to vote is guaranteed to all citizens, regardless of their gender. So some of the key aspects of this amendment, the ratification of the amendment was hastened, meaning it was quickened by women's contributions at home during World War I. So the fact that women went out, worked in factories, people began to see them as a vital part of our country. It doubled the voter base in the 1920 election. And it instantly made women a powerful political force in American politics. But we don't necessarily see them using their political power until later on. So here are some pictures you see of the women's suffrage movement. So women would have parades, have campaigns to really get this going. So some of the key figures in the women's suffrage movement were Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Sojourner Truth. And so it was a constant fight from the late 1800s. And so finally with 1920, the passage of the 19th Amendment made it all happen. So the 20s woman. After gaining suffrage, women in the 20s began to assert their independence. They began to challenge traditional values and began to demand equal rights. So, how did women's lives change? First of all, there were new job opportunities for women. As veterans returned home, women left the factories to return to their house as homemakers, mothers, wives. But employment in white-collar jobs began to peak for women. White-collar meaning office-type jobs, secretary work, clerical work. A lot of women became nurses, teachers, clerks, bankers. So there were these kind of like traditional roles, jobs that women would fill. Women were ideal for these types of jobs because there wasn't a lot of room for them to be promoted or ask for higher pay. It allowed for businesses to find people to do, typist work, and women were content to just have a job and do that work. Female contributions during World War I earned them respect and credibility. So let's look at how jobs for women changed from 1910 to 1930. So if you look at the pie chart for 1910, the biggest graph for women, or the biggest portion that women are filling, is going to be domestic work. So housekeepers, homemakers, anything within the household. The next largest is manufacturing. A lot of them were working in factories at the time. And then agricultural work. So those are the big three. Then we go to 1930. So still you have a huge percentage within the domestic field. Manufacturing went down a little bit, but still second. Next, though, we have the clerical field. So we're seeing more women in office-type jobs. We're also seeing more women moving into the professional field and less within agriculture. I think that also shows a shift from people leaving rural areas, farm life, and moving to big cities looking for different type of work. So new roles for women. A woman's role in the family, marriage, and society began to modernize. Women began to see that they had options, that they didn't have to get married right away when they're 18, start having kids right away. Some women chose to go to college, enhance their education. Some women chose to get jobs. So we began to see marriage and birth rates declining in the 1920s. So if you look at the graph here, it says live births per 10,000 women. And so you just see birth rates slowly going down excuse me, primarily because women are choosing to wait to have kids. Women began to date longer, focused on their careers, and exercised new options. New appliances made life for housewives more convenient. They didn't have to do all of the work themselves by hand. You had washers, vacuum cleaners, other types of appliances to assist them. So we began to see women becoming free and less tied down to traditional family responsibilities. So women continued to challenge traditional expectations as their authority grew. Women became more assertive and bold throughout society. Boundaries were pushed as women redefined their status and image. So one example, the flapper. So the flapper was the ideal image of an emancipated, independent young woman of the 1920s. She represented so much for the era. You have the fashion elements, the short hairstyle, the new style of dress, but also it was more of just fashion. It was a lifestyle. She was independent. She had a job. She didn't conform to these old social norms of how women should behave. So she threw off the stuffy Victorian restrictions and embraced urban style and attitudes. She was a symbol of rebellious youth and sophistication within the 1920s. Oftentimes, women adopting this style would cut their hair short, called a bob, dye it jet black, and wore fashionable hats. And so women have always had long hair, even though a lot of times they style it up. But just the cutting of the hair and kind of the rejection of old standards, it really, while it's fashion, it really says a lot in terms of how women are thinking, how they want to be perceived. Flappers were also known to stay out all night, go to nightclubs, smoke cigarettes, drink. I mean, they didn't want to be quote unquote ladylike. They were sassy, they were liberated, and like I said, they wanted to be independent. And so this type of lifestyle can only come about if women can support themselves. So the fact that women can have their own jobs means they don't have to rely on their father or a husband to support them. They can support themselves. And so it's all connected that way. You know, women are experiencing so much more freedom and equality during this period. So here are some pictures to kind of show this contrast. You have kind of the old style of women, this Victorian era Gibson girl, and then you see the new flapper. And so you see the style of clothes change, where the old Gibson girl Victorian era had long skirts, long sleeves, collars that covered all the way up to their necks, so showed very little skin, emphasized a small waist, often wearing corsets, where then the flapper is a complete rejection of that look. They're wearing loose-fitting clothes, short hair, showing lots of skin, and so today, this is not very drastic, but back then, to go from women dressing like this in 1910, early 1900s, to then dressing like the flapper, it's a huge change. And so, again, representing this old versus new, traditional versus modern. And so while people in the cities may have adopted this, it wasn't seen all over the place. So the double standard. The flapper image was used in magazines and movies to sell goods. You often saw, actresses and celebrities adopting it, and women living in the city life. And so while women were drawn to the fashionable image of a flapper, but in reality it was hard to live up to that, and not all women accepted it. So you had a lot of women that still wanted to retain their traditional views. Young people began to throw off old courting rituals, began to embrace more casual dating, not becoming serious right away. However, many younger girls and elders resisted the loose morals of the flappers, and usually men were granted greater freedom in dating while women were judged. So even though these flappers lived this lifestyle, it didn't mean they were free from judgment or from people criticizing them. So in that way, they did not experience equality similar to what a man would experience. So we're done with the notes today. Today we focused on the changing role of women, new jobs, new opportunities in the family, and also new styles of dress.